1966. Middle-aged banking executive Arthur Hamilton is feeling a little unfulfilled. On paper, he has it all: a powerful job, a glamorous secretary, a big house in Scarsdale, New York, a devoted wife. But there's an emptiness, a dissatisfaction. One day, he receives an enticing offer, a second chance at life. With a staged death and a nifty bit of cosmetic surgery, Arthur could transform into a younger, more handsome version of himself, move away, assume a new identity, and begin a whole new life. What could possibly go wrong? Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and we discuss John Frankenheimer's twisted psychological body horror, Seconds. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the midst of our 11th season exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and this is part 13. In this week's episode, as that intro suggested, we are going to be talking about one film, and one film only, Seconds from 1966, directed by John Frankenheimer. This is a brilliant film. It's quite an experience. I would recommend everybody watch the film before you listen to our discussion. So joining me to discuss Seconds, I've got a brand new guest with me. She is a writer, critic, broadcaster. She also wrote a book on Seconds. So what better time to have her join the podcast? Welcome, Emma Westwood. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. It's bright and early, 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning for me right now because I'm talking to you in Melbourne. So it's Sunday night for you, right?
7 p.m, yeah, I'm coming from the future.
Exactly, yeah, beaming you in from the future. So thank you so much for being here, Emma. Just as it's your first time on the podcast, just tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, that's always a hard question to answer, isn't it? I would say I'm a writer at heart. So I came from a background in arts journalism, and I progressed, I would say, to being an author of books on film. More in recent years, I'd say, when I say recent years, in the last 15 years, that seems recent to me. I've got more into broadcasting and film commentating, I'd say. So, and that's been really exciting because I like the connections that you get by speaking to like-minded people, I guess, rather than the distance that comes through writing. You know, it's there's more of an instant gratification when I get to talk to people like you, Mike. And
absolutely.
But
absolutely.
I appeared for a few years on a show with someone you're very familiar with, who's Alexandra Helen Nicholas.
Legend.
Yes, she is a legend. She is our queen. So, you know, I am just a disciple. Lower your expectations. But we were on a show called Plato's Cave, a radio show, and we were doing basically contemporary film reviews at that point. But my particular area of interest is film history, really.
Nice.
And uncovering all those otherwise known as classics or otherwise classics to be.
I love it. Well, tell me about your relationship with the horror genre then. Have you always been a horror fan?
I've been interested in horror all my life, really. I remember being a kid and being transfixed by the imagery in that Dennis Gifford's Pictorial History of Horror Movies book. I don't know whether you've ever read that, but it was something that was very seminal in my childhood. And I don't think I could even read properly at the time, but I just looking through all these photographs of classic horror movies and, you know, movies that were made long before I was born. And I just felt like they were unlike anything I'd seen before, and they felt so exciting and adventurous and otherworldly. So I was intrigued right from that stage. It was almost like horror was a kind of forbidden fruit, but I very much looked at it through that wondrous eyes of a child, you know.
And what about now as as like more of a seasoned horror fan? What kind of horror do you sort of gravitate towards? Do you have a particular kind of favorite types of kind of a favorite subgenres of horror or anything like that?
Yeah, well, you're actually hitting the sweet spot right now with the man-made monsters that you're speaking of. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that I never actually thought about it being my favorite type of horror movie or subgenre, but it kind of just emerged. If you look at my work, so the books I've written, they're basically all man-made horror movies. So I started with a book on just monster movies, which was a really short book on monster movies too. So it was quite a challenge to write. And it was one of those pocket essentials books that came out in the UK around different areas of film. Like there was even one you might be interested in on carry-on movies.
Oh my God, and, amazing.
Yeah, there's one on carry-on movies and, there'd be one on vampire films or whatever. And I got asked to write on monster movies and from that, I guess there was just this interest tapping into, I think the man-made monster subgenre kind of taps into this fundamental part of the human condition that's always interests me, which is this desire to control things, that previously we've been unable to control or having the power to control, which ends up absolving us of our anxieties, essentially, which is, it's a moot point. We can never achieve it. Like the success is, there's never, you can never actually achieve what they set out to achieve in these stories. So there's always going to be a fatal flaw and a fundamental and a terrible downfall at the end of it. But still, our desire as human beings to be able to make things, to play God, it's in some ways it's Cro-Magnum, it's limbic. It's this, regardless of evolution, it's something we can't shake as human beings. And it dictates every aspect of our life because, we want to rid ourselves of anxiety. We want to be able to take control of our lives or at least perceive that we can in order to achieve true happiness and peace as such.
Yeah, it seems to be such an enduring theme in horror, actually, doesn't it? I mean, if you go back to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it's kind of like, day dot of horror as a genre in a way. And it's still as popular now as it ever was, right? It's you look at some sort of subgenres like slasher movies or certain others that kind of go through kind of ebbs and flows in popularity, but it feels like this one has kind of always been enduringly popular, hasn't it? I think.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's always prescient. It just makes sense. The technology might change, but it's still all there. It was galvanism for Mary Shelley. I mean, she saw electric pulses going through dead frogs' limbs and showing how they twitch and seemingly come to life. And that's what inspired her for Frankenstein. Yeah. So it's really, it's ripe for the picking. And, there's always even looking back at stuff and seeing how prophetic certain movies were. When they came out, people might have thought they were quite far-fetched, like Seconds. I think that there was, no doubt people thought, well, that's crazy. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's not really that crazy when you think about it.
Totally, yeah. I mean, Seconds feels quite prophetic in a way, right? That idea of kind of identity and, the plastic surgery and this idea of, changing or transitioning. It's interesting. I think at the heart of Seconds, there's something really human and really real too.
Indeed. Seconds plays part of an informal trilogy as well. So you've got John Frankenheimer, who's the filmmaker, the director. He actually, Seconds is a third film and the most human, I guess, not human, that's not the right word, the most personal of these three films in his informal trilogy, which began with Manchurian Candidate and then went to 7 Days in May, which came out a year before Seconds, I believe, and then Seconds. So they were known as the Paranoia trilogy, or the State of the Nation trilogy, because they were very much talking contemporaneously to the mood of what was going on, particularly in the United States at that time. So in terms of politics, but also sociological, social, cultural changes, really big changes that were happening at that time in America. And we talk about technological advances now. I think that culturally what was going on in terms of where it was coming from in the 50s and going into in the 60s, there's never been a period of such rapid growth or change as that. You just think about the ideal of the 1950s of what that represented compared to jump forward to say something like 1968 and the counterculture and that. So you've got the time where you've got parents who, you know, had little children, little Bobby and Johnny, gee whiz, golly, oh shucks, sort of in the 1950s, who all of a sudden have long hair and are, you know, going way out, man, and, you know, and men are looking like women and everyone's having sex and taking drugs, and they're like, well, I don't recognize my children, you know. This is, I mean, there's a certain extent of that always happens with each generation, but it was really extreme at that time. And there was a lot of anxiety that went along with that, and a lot of trying to grapple with that change. All of that strangely plays out in Seconds. It might seem like it has nothing to do with Seconds, but it absolutely does.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah, you're so right. And I think you're right. You know, there has never been a more transitional decade in modern history, particularly in the West and in America, as the 1960s, I think, right? In terms of everything changing, kind of politics, culture, generations, technology, everything went through such a massive change. So it's impossible not to read Seconds as, you know, very much kind of a story about that change, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you had also the rise of the women's liberation movement, the introduction of the pill, the dismantling of basically the Judeo-Christian religious dominance that was in America. So, you know, I mean, you think about Americans have "In God We Trust" written on their legal tender. I mean, that's how intrinsic religion is as part of American society. Yet you had in 1966, the year that Seconds was coming out, you had the famous Time magazine cover, which was asked the question, is God dead?
Right.
And it was seen as this time of the new religion. What was the new religion? It was this religion of self. That's ostensibly what the Church of Satan was that came about in 1966. It was actually launched as a church on Good Friday, which represents change in the Christian culture. And despite the fact that it's called the Church of Satan, it was not about worshipping Satan. Satan was a Christian construct. It was about appreciating in some ways, your ego and liberating your true self and being your animal self in many ways. So you can see why it appealed to a lot of actors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it links to obviously people like Aleister Crowley, that doesn't it as well? And then of course that whole counterculture movement and filmmakers like Kenneth Anger. Fascinating. Such an interesting time, right? So
it is. And that's where you got that in such a, really, I find Seconds is such a simple film. It's very straightforward in the way it's delivered, but it's basically, it taking all of those elements and distilling them, and this is what comes out.
Love that. Well, that was perfectly set up. That's a lovely bit of background context. Let's get into the film. So we're going to talk about Seconds from 1966.
Bold. Bizarre. Terrifying. Rock Hudson, in an astonishing change of pace, stars in Seconds.
Emma, I always get my guests to give me a little plot synopsis, so tell us, what is Seconds all about?
Okay, so it's basically the story of an upper middle class, middle-aged, straight white guy in mid-20th century America. And he's sunk into an inescapable hole of existential dread and depression. That's what the crux of it is. He receives a phone call from an old Harvard friend who is supposedly dead, or he thought was dead, who tells him that he can start his life again afresh if he just comes to this address, which is 34 Lafayette Street, and then everything will be taken care of him. And he doesn't go into the explanation of what that is, but ultimately that is that this company, this commercial enterprise, has created a business model around faking people's deaths and giving them new identities, new lifestyles according to what they really want, which they work out in a drug-induced state of some interrogation under a drug-induced state. And that includes plastic surgery as well in order to give them a whole new physical appearance so they're not recognizable. And then the actual guts of this film is the tragedy that unfolds when this character, who's called Arthur Hamilton, seemingly reluctantly goes along with this invitation to assume a new identity, or he's compelled to find out anyway. And he goes through the process, and yet he is still unable to shake who he really is. So he's unable to reach any point of happiness or satisfaction.
Love that. So, first of all, Emma, just like overall thoughts on the film, what do you think of it? Obviously, you've written a book about this movie, right? So I'm assuming you're a fan.
Yes, I am a fan. It was a film that I don't think you could write 45,000 words on a film without being a fan. It would be really painful because you do live very closely with the film in order to do that. And I don't know how many people would be willing to do that with Seconds, because it's an uncomfortable experience. It's not particularly nice to be close to it, and hence why it was a commercial flop at the time of its release. And it did people reacted very strongly to it, let's say. But I think it's a remarkable film. I do like, and part of my love of horror is a love of provocative cinema. So I actually get excited by that. And that idea of when an artist through storytelling can prod at things in life and ask questions and not necessarily solve them, but at least bring the questions to light, because it's very easy to just walk through life and not notice a whole lot of things. And it's an artist's prerogative to bring that to us. And I think Seconds is a film that for me, it's a perfect film. And it was, when I first watched it, I watched it in my 30s, so I actually came to it. I watched it on a beautiful, I think it was the Criterion release of it. So it was a lovely print. It wasn't some, TV broadcast with ads in the middle of it or anything like that. So I was able to sink right into it. And I think I was also able to come to it with a level of maturity that helped the film stay with me. So it probably wouldn't have resonated so much if I'd watched it when I was younger, for instance, because the film does assume a certain level of lived experience from its audience. Even if you're not a middle-aged white guy, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But you need to have reached a certain point in your life where you have a history as an adult, and therefore you have memories, and you also have elements of regret that you can reflect on, and that's all that Seconds makes you think about, right? Yeah. So I didn't actually intend on writing a book on it, but the opportunity presented itself when a fellow Devil's Advocate, I don't know whether you know the Devil's Advocate series of horror film monographs.
I do.
Yeah,
we have them over here. Yeah.
Yep. So I wrote Jez Connolly. He's in the UK, and he wrote one of the Devil's Advocates about The Thing, and I'd written one about David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Yeah.
And he approached me about writing seconds with him because I must have put out something on social media, I can't remember, about my love of seconds. And he said, I've started a book on for Devil's Advocate's sibling imprint on science fiction films. So this was classified as a science fiction film in this case, called, and that line is called Constellations. Yeah. And he said, so I'm having trouble finding time to finish this book. And he said, it's not going to be done unless I bring someone else on board. And would you like to do it? So I leapt at the opportunity, basically.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, I love this film too, actually. I saw it for the first time only about 5 years ago. I think it was when I was doing a series of the podcast on sort of mind and body horror. So I was doing a lot of kind of quite weird, kind of internal kind of horror stuff, and I didn't include it, which I probably should have actually. And then I had a lot of messages from listeners being like, "Have you seen Seconds? You should definitely check out Seconds." And so I thought this is a good opportunity now to actually cover it, because I watched it and I absolutely loved it. And actually watching it again in preparation for this, I think I loved it even more. Maybe it's 5 years on. I'm 38 now. I'm hurtling towards 40 and middle age. Maybe that's what it is. But it really resonated with me actually watching it again. I think you're absolutely right about how this film, I don't think it would have hit me in the same way if I'd watched it as a teenager that was like, you know, watching slasher movies and stuff. You know, I think it is suited for somebody, like you say, with a little bit more life experience, probably. Yeah. Yeah,
you absolutely have to, because it talks about it's essentially a film about memory when it comes down to it, and Frankenheimer has said that himself. And so if you're too young, like the 5-year-old me looking at Dennis Gifford's Pictorial History of Horror book, I'm not going to have much to bring to it, am I? And I did watch horror movies at 5 years old. I mean, terrible. I shouldn't have, but I did. and yeah, Seconds is also, you know, for someone young, it's not a fast-paced film by any means. And, no. And it's very considered, it's very talky, and it's also really, it's got protracted periods of silence, which is something that I didn't notice as much watching it on a home entertainment format. But I got to do a presentation of it in a cinema last year, and watching it again with the audience, I realized how quiet it was as a film. So you could really hear people moving around, and you feel it's quite an uncomfortable experience watching it communally. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that. Yeah, for sure. So, and I think that the genre element of it is really interesting, right? Because this movie starts feeling, I think, incredibly tense. Like that opening sequence, even the opening credits and the kind of the music and the style of this, and then the opening sequence where we're introduced to Arthur and he's being kind of followed through the train station, and that moment when he gets given the note and the music is like, bah, 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 you know, like it is very much like we are dropped straight into what feels like a kind of paranoia horror film, right? I think it feels
absolutely.
like. And then it kind of goes off, and there is a kind of midsection that almost feels like we're watching some sort of romantic drama or something when we're on Malibu Beach with Rock Hudson, you know? So I think it's really interesting the way Frankenheimer kind of, I don't know, it kind of plays with genre throughout this movie, you know?
It sure does. Well, that's the interesting thing about you choosing it for man-made monsters.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily something that would jump out as that category of film, but it is that film. Yeah. It's also not, I wouldn't call it a genre film.
No.
I think you can't categorize it. I think it really stands in its own kind of Frankensteinian, Frankenheimian hybrid of things, you know. And in fact, I think on our book, what did we describe it as? We described it as a criminally overlooked monolith of paranoia, part science fiction, part body horror, part noir thriller, come black comedy. So, because although the black comedy is probably a little bit of a stretch, but there are definitely comedic elements in it.
Oh, definitely. I think the way that the company is portrayed, there is a real black comedy there, isn't there? And I feel like I can see its legacy and its influence in later movies that I grew up watching, whether it's kind of like the madness of something like Being John Malkovich or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That idea of like these companies that kind of exist on the outskirts of kind of, I don't know, kind of mainstream life that do these kind of crazy science fiction type things, you know?
Yeah. It's like you kind of think of where that company is positioned, 34 Lafayette Street, wherever. Well, that's not where the company is because that's where he meets and they take him away. But it's kind of like that. What is it? The 4.5 floor?
Exactly.
I can't remember what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie Kaufman was a fan of this. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised either. I think it's very. It's also just, it picks up on classical literature.
Yeah.
It's a film that it's Kafka, it's Faust.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, it's so simple, you know. And that's what they're the kind of films I really appreciate. It's something that's just so rich and yet can do so with less brushstrokes.
Right.
And you were right from saying that, or I think you're right from saying that the opening credits, right from the opening credits, I remember when I saw it, I was captivated right from the first frame. That I was, what the hell am I going to watch here? I didn't know anything about it. I knew John Frankenheimer. My uncle, who I watched so many films with, suggested we sit down and watch it. And I'm a sucker for a good credit sequence, and it's Saul and Elaine Bass credit sequence, and they're like the heroes of, and especially credit sequences that mirror the film so beautifully. Yeah. And it's such a perfect setup for the film. It's body parts and they're all mashed together. I think there's a great one where you've got like the big nose against an eye. I forget which credit gets to be put up against that, but that's the card I would be requesting if I was on the film crew.
Yes, it's so good. It's so good. And absolutely. I mean, let's just talk a little bit about John Frankenheimer's direction and James Wong Howe's cinematography as well. Like, what do you think of just the way this movie looks? Because like you say, it is unbelievably striking from the very beginning and feels quite different from, I guess, just kind of like mainstream American cinema at this time, you know?
Oh, sure does. Yeah. I think even the fact that it's, they chose to make it in black and white.
Yeah.
Because in 1966, there were a lot of colour film around. It wasn't kind of the done thing to choose black and white unless I guess you were on a budget. But this did have some serious grunt in terms of money behind it. So it's from Edward Lewis was the producer who was Kirk Douglas's producing partner. So Kirk Douglas had a hand behind this. He's like, you don't really see his name, but he was seminal in the production of it. And the look and feel of it is part of the defining qualities. I mean, really, it wouldn't be the same movie without it. I could imagine it being done in a different way, and I could imagine a different director doing it. For example, I could imagine Hitchcock doing it.
Yes, definitely.
And I could imagine him playing up different aspects of it. But what Frankenheimer brings to it, which is so special and so unique of the time, was that, first of all, he came from a huge body of work. He was only 35 when he made Seconds, but he was hugely experienced, and he came from a background in TV, which was sort of the poor cousin at that time. At that time, he was directing what they called live TV drama, and it's something that we don't really see these days. I think if you say live TV, you kind of think of variety shows, but these were basically stage plays on that were then broadcast live and directed and filmed and broadcast live.
Yeah.
He did over 100 of them.
Wow.
And yeah, it's nuts. Absolutely nuts. And he had a few films before Seconds as well. He was on a roll at this time. But he also, there was a certain style that came directly from that live TV drama, which was that ability to capture things on the fly and not necessarily to have to set up things to perfection, right? So you look at him and Frankenheimer's work, despite the fact that I think, this looks perfect, Seconds, everything, not a thing out of place. But he wasn't anally retentive in the way that a Kubrick would be.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you have the first film in the trilogy, the Paranoia State of the Nation trilogy, which is The Manchurian Candidate. Frank Sinatra's takes were often the first take that they did. That ended up in the final cut of the film. And that's the way Frankenheimer worked, where you've got Kubrick who would do something like 100 takes.
Yes.
And because of that, you got a particular type of performance in Frankenheimer films that you see end up on screen. A level of spontaneity to them.
Yeah.
That you don't really see. Even though this is arty and stylized, he was a favourite for actors because he just let them act. He didn't get in the road.
Yeah, I love that. There is something that feels very, compared to Kubrick, for example. I mean, I'm covering 2001 next week, and compared to
really?
that,
Okay.
Yeah.
Very different film.
Yeah, there's something so kind of organic and alive about the filmmaking here, right? The kind of handheld nature of it, and getting up close and personal in actors' faces, in busy crowds and train stations and everything. I don't know. I love that feel of it. Everything, like you say, feels very kind of spontaneous and organic in that way. And I really love that. I thought of Hitchcock as well. I also thought a bit of Polanski. There's something a bit Polanski to me about this movie as well. Obviously Repulsion.
Yes.
Coming out the same year as this. There's something that looks very much, it's almost like they could almost be sort of brother-sister films, like male-female equivalent films.
I agree.
And actually even Rosemary's Baby a couple of years later with the kind of paranoia element and all of the people in the apartment block and everything, like it feels very much of that, I guess, that kind of newer Hollywood feel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If we're talking that kind of transitional era of filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely. The new upstarts that were coming in and sort of shaking up the industry. And you had so the contemporaries of Frankenheimer, direct contemporaries, were Sidney Lumet and Arthur Penn.
Right.
So they came from, they had basically the same apprenticeship. So they came from live TV dramas. So, you look at their films as well, and there's a lot of parallels to Frankenheimer's. But in a number of ways, he was very much like, whereas you would talk about Kubrick as an auteur, right? I don't think that Frankenheimer, look, I believe he had a huge ego. I haven't, I would not argue against that, but I don't believe he really saw himself as an auteur. He was more of a journeyman filmmaker. And he worked with writers. So what you get, he didn't write them himself. He worked very closely with his writers, and unlike other directors or filmmakers, he would bring the writers onto set, and he would often defer to the writers and ask them questions on set. And I think that comes out in his films as well. And also, he wasn't scared to go, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing here. I'm going to get as much coverage as possible, and then we're going to put it together in the edit. Yeah. So he relied a lot on his editors as well. And you get to see that in something like The Manchurian Candidate, where there's this amazing, the Manchurian brainwashing reveal that is also the participants think that they're at a ladies' garden show, a ladies' club in New Jersey, and the way it cuts between the two. was something that he used the writer and the editor to help him feel his way through. The writer even came into the editing suite to do. And in seconds, something like that grape stomp bacchanalian scene that we have in there, that was pretty much done in the same way. Like, let's just work with it. They were with a group of kind of counterculture hippies who did this festival every year, and it was like, let's just get the coverage and see what we can do with it.
Amazing. So like a kind of real mix of almost like documentary sort of verite with kind of art house, right? It's a really interesting mix.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Its downfall for audiences was that they found it hard to find the right audience because it was deemed as arty and a little bit too arty, right?
Yeah.
But I love it.
I love it. I love it too. I love that it kind of straddles all these different areas. I think even, we'll get to this a bit later, but even the casting of Rock Hudson, right, I think feels really interesting in that regard. But let's talk about our main character who we're introduced to at the beginning, Arthur Hamilton. From the second we meet him, Arthur, he seems not okay, this guy, right?
No.
What do you make of him as our sort of main character in this first act of the movie and that performance as well by John Randolph?
Yeah, I found him he's kind of spectacular for being unspectacular, if you know what I mean. He's sort of
perfectly put.
Yeah, everyone and nobody. But he has the spoils of privilege, basically. So he's everything he could want in life, but nothing he wants in life. And we can only assume that he's basically everything's been given to him because of his station in life. So he hasn't had to really work for anything, despite the fact that, he's a banker and obviously, risen through the ranks. It would have been a bit of an old boys network. Let's, be honest. That's the way it would have worked at that time. So, he's had decisions made for him. He's just it's like he's on this escalator of life, right? Escalator of privilege, poor little rich guy. And that's another thing that it, dares to, position the protagonist as victim, as someone who really isn't being victimized in life, right?
Yeah.
He's an apex predator. He's at the top of the tree, He's a white male in America, in mid-20th century America. You can't get much better than that, really.
Right. Yeah. He's almost got that kind of like sort of, there's a kind of Mad Men-esque kind of lifestyle, right, that he lives, that perfect. That perfect home, that perfect wife, that corporate New York job, his secretary, his assistant. Yeah, like in theory, he kind of has it all, right?
He has it all. In fact, you mentioning Mad Men, it is heavily influenced by Seconds. I haven't heard Matthew Weiner, I think who's the creator of Mad Men, but it is astoundingly similar to Seconds in its thematic study and what it pulls out and says about the time. But back to John Randolph in this role. It was John Randolph's first role in 15 years.
Wow.
And that was because he was blacklisted. And he was one of the longest American actors on the blacklist.
Wow.
And it's a really interesting comeback film. It was, and as I've said, it wasn't a success. I think he plays this role. I don't know what he was tapping into. Maybe that sense of, because I can't imagine what it would have been like to have been, blacklisted or had this mark branded with the M mark on the back of you and not being able to work, being cast aside, lose your identity.
Wow.
What can I say? You would have lost your identity. So what you see there on screen, I think it's interesting. I've never heard John Randolph talk about it. I can't say what he was actually bringing to the role, but I can only imagine that there was a lot of sorrow and pain at that stage that he was able to bring and put on screen as that very sad sack Arthur Hamilton character who, is agitated. He shows that it's restrained agitation, and it's really only shown physically, you can see the darting of his eyes at times, and he'll snap at his wife, but he sweats profusely, and the sweat is the big giveaway in this.
Yes, there's a lot of sweat.
That's a big tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a great tradition of films about middle-aged men suffering midlife crisis or ennui with their life, right? I think of, like, again, everything from kind of American Beauty to Falling Down to whatever, like, and I think especially now in 2025 we view those sorts of characters differently potentially. But do you feel for Arthur Hamilton in this? You know, like, is this just a kind of shallow midlife crisis, or is there something deeper going on here with him?
Yeah, I think that it's hard. He's not a likable character, right? So it's hard to really feel truly, really sorry for him. But I think that it's more of what he represents. He represents the weight of bigger depression, a bigger societal depression. You can say the world's smallest violin crying for white men in America at that stage. But it was a thing. It was an actual thing. It was there was a white male crisis going on at that time. Run Rabbit, that was the John Updike book, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure. Revolutionary Road, the Yeats book. Right. There was a lot of books that were talking about it. Then you've got a film like Frank Perry's The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster. That was a very, very interesting take on that. And Cassavetes films, John Cassavetes films often touched on that, the male crisis of, like, not knowing who they were, where they were going, or anything like that. So I think rather than feeling sorry for him, I think that it's, I'm always intrigued by what he represents and his expression of something, because it's an experience that isn't my experience. It will never be my experience. I can't fully empathize with it in any way because I'm a woman. So, it's interesting to look at it from that outside. I find it interesting looking at men under pressure films. I like a good submarine film.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. And I agree. I think he's an interesting character, and you really feel like he's going through something big here. Like, it's not just that he is bored, right? Or that he's, after some bit of totty in the office and that's it. Like, there is something, like, he seems to be suffering with a real, what appears to be a depression, I think, to me. And it almost feels like his wife sort of knows about it too, right? Is that they live in this stasis, the two of them, in their separate beds, and he doesn't really talk to her, and she's kind of trying to make the effort with him, and she sort of knows he's going through something, but they have a quite sad marriage, don't they, that we get a glimpse of here.
Absolutely. But I think it was symptomatic of the times where you wouldn't express your depression. It was manly to be depressed, was it?
Exactly.
And it wouldn't be something that you want to admit to your wife. I mean,
and of course there is another element to this, which is that he is thinking about this phone call that he got the night before. And I think there's an interesting choice the film makes too, is that we don't see or hear that first phone call that he received the night before. So we are plonked straight into a kind of a bit of a mystery, aren't we, in terms of, like, what he's been thinking about, what he's been offered, what this company have said to him this, or at least his friend Charlie, said to him on that first night. Because as soon as we're introduced to him, he's clearly thinking about the phone call he received the night before. And the wife says, I heard you pacing up and down in the middle of the night after you got a phone call. And he's, sweating and panicky about it. And he's sitting there in front of the phone the following night. We see him, waiting for that follow-up call. So I think that's interesting too, right? That the film really holds back a lot of information, actually, doesn't it, about this company and what was offered to him and what he knows about it and what we know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more explanation in the book that it's based on.
Right.
But I think that the film, they made some really good decisions in a cinematic sense of what to include and what not to include from the book, because you don't want to explain it too much. I think as an unfolding, as a journey in the film, it's better to leave the mystery there and allow yourself to kind of, the viewer to slowly piece in the missing pieces as they go along. But it's something that I don't know whether you've seen, but you've experienced it when you've repeat watched seconds, but there's some questions that will rise up, like why would anyone agree to getting that done without agreeing to what the end product is going to be? Choosing, I want to be Rock Hudson, right? I think anyone would choose that, but he didn't choose that. Right. That's what he just happened to get. Right. I know. And in the book, he actually asks, do I get to choose what I look like, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, look, well, we used to let people do that, but then they keep on tweaking and they keep on fiddling and the costs blow out. So we took that clause out of the contract. So there's things like that, if you wanted to poke holes in, the realism of it, I mean, Rock Hudson's a much taller man than John Randolph, right? Things like that. Yeah. But I think that the film really sells it. By the time you're on, it gets you, like we were talking about in terms of going from the credits, right? We're immediately in the paranoia. It's already started before we've got to that point. So we're being hurtled along on this journey. We're too busy piecing everything together, and we're too busy going on that journey with him. By then we're so invested that we tend to go along with whatever's presented to us.
Right. It's really interesting. And so let's talk about the company. So he receives a follow-up phone call, and then he was given on the train an address to go to, and he decides he's going to go, right, after receiving a phone call from somebody who is claiming to be his old dead friend, Charlie, who has now been put into a new body. And so we get this incredible sequence where he goes to the company, right, where he has to go to, what is it? First of all, they're like pressing clothes or something in some sort of shop. Like what? Yeah, and then he gets taken to a meat packing sort of district building, right? Of used cows, is it, or something like that, right? Put in the back of a truck and taken somewhere else. Like, it's so kind of absurdist and surreal, all of that stuff, isn't it?
I know. It's you can't help but laugh. I mean, it's a laundromat.
That's
essentially is at the start. And what I love about that is, I don't know whether they dressed that as a set or went into a real laundromat, because a lot of the locations are real. But once you get a chance to look what's within the frame, you see these amazing things like those sticky, people don't use them anymore because they're quite gross. Those sticky fly catchers, where you have the tape and the flies just kind of attach to it and just die there. And you have like this streamer of dead flies in the middle of the room. They've got one of them in there. You see it in the shot. It's a busy shot. It's a busy scene. It's sweaty. It's got the sounds of the steam. They're kind of ignoring him because, don't you love it? They give out the wrong address. Do they do that on purpose? I don't know. He says, oh yeah, they've moved. They go around, you've got to go around the corner. I don't know whether that is a company ploy or whether it shows that there's some sloppiness on behalf of the company. Who knows? But then he goes around to the beautifully titled Honest Arnie's used cow dealers.
Used cow dealers. What a horrible phrase.
I know. But the thing is, Mike, and this is the beautiful thing about it, that was an actual business. That wasn't made up. That was, they just took advantage of Honest Arnie's business for the film, and this amazing space, really, when it comes down to it, that abattoirs where he's walking through, and it's these row upon row of carcasses, cattle carcasses, just hanging from their feet.
Yeah.
And if anything, it just foreshadows what's coming. It's the cadaver processing.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's death as a corporate business, right?
It is.
And I guess that's it. The whole film is so much, it feels so much about that idea of capitalism, right? Businesses, corporate greed, materialism, all of that. And you're right, that's all very much here.
Absolutely. And, ironically, that's what it appears that Arthur's downfall. He's walking in step with capitalist society. And then he's literally consumed by the capitalist machine, trying to get out of it. It's it's a film. It's a linear film, a linear narrative, a very striking linear narrative, a very strong 3-act structured film, but it is a cyclical film. It represents a far bigger cycle of things, a cycle of life, cycle of consumerism, cycle of society, sleep, work, die cycle, everything. Like it's quite impressive. But the company, who they are, how they were set up, they've just called the company. They can't advertise. They acknowledge that. That's why they have to rely on referrals, which is just like a piece of poetry when you come back, because we start with him, wandering around and going into that room where all these guys are sitting with telephones in front of them on the desks, and you think, what's this? What is this? And then they're like, Mr. Wilson, come this way, and they're already calling him Mr. Wilson, and only later we find out that they have to, for the ones that have failed, and there's a lot of them, and they admit they have a high failure rate, that that's how they recruit others. They make the phone calls. They're the Charlies that are calling the Arthur Hamiltons in the middle of the night and saying, and the fact that that's the way they can sell, that there are enough people or enough men in the circumstances of this film, because we have no insight into whether there's women, but I don't think this is a woman's story. So I think we can assume there aren't any women. So the company is a men's club, a gentleman's club, that's dealing in new identities. But if that doesn't work, then, death is a growing business.
Apparently so. It really is. It's really great. I think this is some of my favorite stuff in the film, the stuff that goes on here at the business, at the company, and the look of it, that really strange sequence where he is drugged and kind of seems to sexually assault a woman, or goes to sexually assault a woman, and initially we're not sure if that's a dream or a hallucination. Then it turns out, of course, it was real, and they're using that to blackmail him, and it's so kind of sinister, all this stuff, isn't it?
That always, immediately when I watched Get Out, I thought of that scene, the company office scene in Seconds. So where he's brought the tea, he's expressly offered tea, not coffee, and that's that kind of falling down the rabbit hole, that drink me, the Alice in Wonderland
It's
stuff.
very Alice in Wonderland looking, actually, isn't it?
Absolutely. The checkable, you feel like the Mad Hatter's going to come out. That skewed the floor, the fisheye lens, the mauling of her is really strange. I mean, it just looks like they talk about manipulating his arms and legs, and he was easy to manipulate because he was drugged, and but it doesn't look in any way that he's a participant of that scene,
right?
Which is hence gives the dreamlike quality too, because he's kind of, witnessing something rather than partaking in it. And then the company admits that they do that under the drugging to act as an insurance policy, so he can't back out and go and tell anyone about it. But the company has these, the way they refer to him as a client is all very polite and, very much the way that you would expect if you were a customer, especially someone who was paying a lot of money for something. It's all very matter of fact. It's affluent. You look at the art on the walls. In fact, there's a credit at the start of Seconds that talks about where the artwork was on loan from. The artwork is obviously of great significance and is saying something. And then you have these customer service representatives, which are Kai Day, who plays Davalo, who is his kind of, he's like a therapist who's training him for his new life.
Yeah.
But then there's also Ruby, played by Jeff Corey, Mr. Ruby. Jeff Corey was another blacklisted actor as well.
Wow.
And there's and Will Gear, who plays the head of the company, was another blacklisted actor.
Right. Interesting.
So there's quite a lot in this film. That's the political part of it. Mr. Ruby, Jeff Corey's role in it is signing the contract, ticking the boxes, and how he just delivers those lines in, Mr. Wilson, I need to go through the circumstances of your death. Now, we were thinking, hotel burning and, blah, 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 or hotel explosion and and just the way it is also, it's just so businesslike. It's so bankerish, which is the world that he comes from, that Arthur Hamilton, Tony Wilson comes from. Even before, in just a scene before this, we see Arthur Hamilton dictating to his secretary a letter that is turning down someone's extension on or application for a loan.
Yeah.
And in the most coldest terms and, standard sign off and things like that, he says.
Absolutely.
So it's just transactional. It's just purely transactional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And again, that is where the real black comedy comes in. I think that sequence when he's saying, well, we could have you die in a machine accident or a hunting misadventure or all of that stuff. And, you can see Arthur's reaction and he kind of goes, oh no, maybe that's all a bit too gross. How about a nice hotel room fire? And it is very funny in how dark it is.
But while Mr. Ruby is enjoying the chicken that's intended for Mr. Wilson.
I love how they get the cheese crispy.
Yes.
It's so good. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And then, of course, we get that terrifying surgery sequence as well, which again feels pretty groundbreaking and subversive in a lot of ways. Again, reminds me of other kind of almost like a sort of Eyes Without a Face, French New Wave type stuff we were getting at this time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. They were all contemporaries, those films. Eyes Without a Face, also Face of Another, the Japanese film.
Yeah.
Which is, really closely correlates to Seconds in this person getting a whole new identity and just not being able to, be at one with the identity, basically. But you've got in that surgery scene, I think there are a number of scenes that are big sells in this film.
Yeah.
Like if they didn't work well, then the whole film would have toppled over. And that was one of them, right? So to make the leap from John Randolph, just physically from John Randolph to Rock Hudson.
Yeah.
There had to be a pretty believable surgical process. What I love about what Frankenheimer's done there is he's gone, okay, let's make it believable. Let's actually use a real surgery.
Wow.
So that is a real rhinoplasty surgery of the time.
Wow.
Which is particularly, gruesome. It's just rough. It's rough.
Really rough. Yeah, that's right. You can feel how sore that poor person is going to feel after that, right?
And you see the person under anesthetic twitch and move, like their facial muscles move. And I don't know whether that actually happens during surgery. Do you move or do you? Right. I'm not sure. But at that time they did, or whatever anesthetic that person was under, however deep it was, that they were still moving. And apparently when they shot it, about 6 members of the crew passed out. So Frankenheimer actually had to step in as one of the camera people.
Wow.
And finish shooting it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's powerful. Yeah.
How could it not be? But that's another thing where you see Frankenheimer's training coming into play, because he's not scared to work with the realism of walk into a surgery.
Right.
And work around what's there.
Yeah.
Whereas, there's no way Stanley Kubrick would do that. No way.
No.
He's,
No. He would have the whole place controlled, right? And spend a year filming that one scene probably to make it look as realistic as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and then we go, he does it in the shortest amount of time possible, I feel, to get us over that. And then, we get a montage sequence of physical conditioning and some of the mental stuff, but he doesn't labor on it. And then
he doesn't.
No.
Again, everything is kind of kept pretty vague, really, right? In terms of like the logistics, I guess, if we want to say, of how this company works and how all of this stuff works. But I think that makes it work really well. It's kind of woozy, isn't it? This whole film is kind of nauseating and woozy. And so obviously at this point, kind of exit John Randolph and enter Rock Hudson, right? Handsome Rock Hudson, who does look incredible. Even when he's first takes off the bandages and he's covered in those scars, still looks incredibly handsome.
And he's got kind of John Randolph hair still, at that stage,
That's right. That's right. This is a broadcast signal intrusion. What is Deadvault? Deadvault. Join us for a very special announcement this Sunday night, the 19th of October, 8 p.m. UK time, youtube.com/evolution of horror. Now it's time to thank this week's sponsor, the global streaming service Mubi. Mubi have got so much good stuff going on this month through October. They've got a spooky Fear on Film season happening right now with a whole bunch of horror classics from filmmakers such as Lars von Trier, Jennifer Kent and more. And they've also got a brand new film that dropped on the 10th of October, the streaming premiere of Lurker. When a young retail clerk encounters a rising pop star, he takes the opportunity to edge his way into the in crowd. But as the line between friend and fan blurs, access and proximity become a matter of life and death. From the Bear and Beef writer-producer Alex Russell, Lurker is a screw-turning psychological thriller made for the moment. So to watch Lurker and all the other great horror stuff they've got on Mubi this month, you can get 30 days for free through Evolution of Horror. Just head to mubi.com/EOH. That's mubi.com/EOH.
Hi, I'm Andy Bush, host of Scarred for Life, the podcast that takes a deep dive into our guests' childhood fears. Join me and the co-author of the Scarred for Life books, Dave Lawrence, as each week a special guest picks 3 things from pop culture that have given them nightmares. Guests like Michael Sheen, Alice Lowe, Peter Serafinowicz, Danny Robbins, and Evolution of Horror's very own Mike Muncer.
How did they get away with this in a kids' movie? It is traumatizing.
And loads more. Listen to Scarred for Life wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's talk a bit about Rock Hudson, because I think this is something really interesting too, because, again, we keep talking about this film as kind of transitional and being in this transitional period in technology, in filmmaking style, in culture. And Rock Hudson feels very much, to me at least, I associate him with the earlier era of Hollywood, the kind of golden age of Hollywood, right? And melodramas and Doris Day and that kind of stuff. So again, it feels kind of important casting him in this movie in that way,
Yeah, absolutely. I think Frankenheimer talked about it as in it was an artistic good decision. It was a commercial disaster making that decision, right? But he chose. He's complimentary about Rock Hudson's work in it. And I think Hudson was a really closed book, though. He was hard to... I even read his biography, and the biographer made a point of explaining how he was a different man depending on who you spoke to. And it was really hard to get a grasp on who he actually was. So this idea of identity, which... plays out in seconds. So there's a lot of interesting meta detailing, especially around Rock Hudson and Rock Rock Hudson playing this character. But he was super keen to get into roles like this, to break the mold, do something a little bit different. And no doubt, now that we know that he was a closeted gay man at that stage, this speaks so much more to his experiences and what he must have been going through, because he must have felt like one person on the outside and one person on the inside.
Yeah.
And Rock Hudson, his name wasn't Rock Hudson. He was born Roy Fitzgerald. His whole persona was created by the studio to appeal to women, to be a heartthrob, to be a matinee idol.
Yeah.
And that was what he was, that was the mold he was cast in. And he didn't really come from acting. He was actually had to learn on the job.
Right.
Because he was chosen for his looks, his good looks. And you can see how he's developed as an actor in this film. Like, I really feel that he sells it. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't know whether you had a different reaction. I don't actually, but some people, I think, have a different reaction to Rock Hudson when he's the character versus John Randolph, as in potentially that Rock is the handsome, the handsome man, and the way that looks come into play, that you're more likely to feel sorry for him.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I don't.
No,
but there could be.
I don't. In fact, I think weirdly, I think I felt more sorry for John Randolph. There was something just so unbelievably sad about him in that first act, Whereas it's different. And I think that's the really interesting thing about the way Rock Hudson plays this character, and the difference between Arthur and Tony, who he is now known as, right? He's become Tony Wilson. And I guess it brings into play all these questions of, and this is something we've been talking about all through this series since we talked about Frankenstein, actually, is this, like, who are you? What makes you you, right? Is it is it your body? Is it your face? Is it your brain? Is it all of those things? What if you get a brand new face, a brand new identity, you move to a different part of America, you fly to Malibu, you start a new career, you get rid of all the other people in your life, but are you still you on the inside, right? And I think that is really interesting, that we see, obviously, then throughout the rest of the movie, that Tony is just as unsatisfied, miserable, depressed, even, I would say, as Arthur was. Like, nothing has helped, nothing has fixed him.
No, he's the same person, and I can feel that. I don't know about you, but I do get a sense of that in the film. I didn't feel that I got a watching seconds that I got a disconnect when he became when Rock Hudson stepped into the film. It felt like a continuation of that character to me. So I think he's really marvelous in the role. But what Frankenheimer himself deemed as the problem, and I think he was really correct, was that the audiences at the time who would come to see a Rock Hudson movie would not go to see Seconds.
Right.
That's not a movie they would choose to see. And the people who would be likely to see Seconds did not want to see Rock Hudson in that role.
Yeah.
And felt kind of jibbed by that. So, that's why it kind of ended up in this sort of purgatory, basically.
Yeah.
And it did stay in that purgatory for a long time. It was not really watched for a long time.
That's right. Rock Hudson, I knew from my film studies university days, watching, Douglas Sirk movies, and all of that kind of thing, right? And it does. It made me always go, oh, Rock Hudson, whatever. He was just the pretty man that was in those slightly boring films that I didn't really like as a student, So I can see why kind of young, cool, countercultural cinephiles in the mid-1960s maybe didn't want to watch a film starring the guy that was in all those Doris Day movies.
Absolutely.
I can see that.
Absolutely. 100% correct. But he's so amazing. I mean, you see his physicality in it too, and he gets to play the range of emotion out more than because of the circumstances he's put in compared to when John Randolph's playing him as Arthur Hamilton. Rock Hudson has put in these incredibly stressful sequences, like the grape stomp sequence and then his death at the end. And you see this level of where he's fighting against them to try at those closing moments of seconds, which are really devastating and so visceral. Like, he's really thrashing about there.
Yeah.
And it's quite electric. It gives me, goosebumps when I even think about it.
Yeah. I think Rock Hudson's brilliant in this. And then the film really shifts for a while, doesn't it? And we go to this Malibu setting and he's got this gorgeous apartment. I mean, all of this, by the way, Emma, for $30,000, which I know was more back then in the mid 60s. But even so, I think this is a pretty good deal, right? You get this gorgeous Malibu apartment and, everything you could want, basically. You get to look like Rock Hudson. I mean, I'd be tempted.
You get really nice artwork on the walls that people say is your own artwork.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's so funny. But then, of course, that's where we're introduced to this new life, this character of Nora as well, which is interesting, right? And it does almost teeter or teases becoming like a sort of Rock Hudson romance at this point in the film, which is really interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But she's so kooky. Like, she's right.
She is.
And her dialogue's right out there. Like, what's she saying half the time, when she's, even when she first meets him and she's just like, beautiful ocean. And she's sort of, worshipping the sea. I mean, she's just the antithesis of what Hamilton Wilson is. So, it's that idea of opposites attract and using her as, the romantic flame for his moth, and trying to bring him, ingratiating him into this new world, this new life that he's having trouble assimilating into. And she's really quite remarkable. I think I actually was lucky enough to speak with Salome Jens, who's played Nora Marcos. Yeah, Marcos. I grew up on Dario Argento films, so I'll always
Helena Marcos.
I'll always go back to the Suspiria or something. But Nora, the character of Nora, she said that Frankenheimer told her that she had a sense of doom about her that he found that he wanted for that character. And so that's why she was chosen. But she's very much a thespian actor. She's very much a stage actor, Salome Jens. She was in a film called Angel Baby before this, where she played a young girl, spiritual preacher, spiritual healer, faith healer, right? And it came out at the same time as Alma Gantry and kind of got usurped by the bigger film. And sort of went into obscurity, but it's a really electrifying film if you get a chance to have a look at it. And she's remarkable. I think she was only about 19 when she made it. But talking to her about this film, she's the only person alive when maybe there was a crew member here and there, but when I spoke to her, she was 86, 85, about 5 years ago. And she spoke very highly of Rock Hudson and the experience of making this film. And also of the grape stomp sequence. She talked about that in ways that I think it was very uncomfortable, that sequence to make. And because it wasn't because it was a location scene and not a stage scene, and they were basically gate crashing.
Right, like people. An actual festival,
Exactly. She felt very uncomfortable about that. And then the whole stripping off and, jumping in the vat and going crazy and just mushing grapes all over yourselves. And I think that they actually paid in grapes. That's how they
oh, wow.
The film production gifted grapes to this festival, and that's how they got the permission to film there. But yes, that scene, similarly to the surgery scene, the grape stomp scene with Nora is such an important scene for the film.
Yeah.
And the film could have toppled over on the basis of that not working.
Yes. Yes.
And it wasn't in the book. Yeah, that was purely conceived for the film itself. And I think that it is just a really easy shorthand by choosing that festival and choosing to do it in that way to have his coming out.
Yeah,
as such,
absolutely.
In that way.
It's a wild scene, isn't it? And it works really well, actually, in that it is... Coming out is perfect way to put it, actually, isn't it? Because it is this, like... It couldn't be more different to the lifestyle that he had previously lived, right? Or at least the lifestyle that everything we'd seen up until this point, this very clean, clinical, corporate / kind of perfect, family life, 1950s, blah, blah, blah. And then, like you say, that kind of tectonic plate hitting this other one of like 1960s kind of counterculturalism and all of that kind of stuff, and naked and covered in grapes. And even the style of filmmaking, the kind of handheld, manic style of filmmaking, it feels like we're in a different world, a different movie at this point, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Oh God, absolutely. And that's the thing. I feel that he's kind of it's like the sex scene of the film as well.
Yeah.
And it's strange to say that because there are other sexual moments, awkward sexual moments, like the staged rape and at one stage where Arthur Hamilton is his wife have this really dick shriveling engagement with each other. It's just terrible. It's so awkward. You feel like, what am I doing here in their bedroom? Please let me out, kind of thing. But this scene, is the one where it's really the orgasm of the film, right?
Yeah.
And
it's euphoric, isn't it? Yeah.
Euphoria is a really perfect word to place on it, because you get him, though, it's really it's uncomfortable because he's dragged there to the vat. It almost is like a rape. Like he's saying, no, 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 no. And they're dragging him there, and these people are like, no, it's fun, and completely ignoring him, ignoring his distress, and then throwing him in. And then, and Salome Jens did talk about, she said, when I really threw myself into it, though, when I agreed to do it. She expressed her reticence, but then she said, I just went throwing and I'm mushing grapes all over me. And the grapes, I think, especially when you've got it filmed in black and white, start looking like an afterbirth all over him and all over them. It has that. And then you can see that moment, and Rock does it so beautifully, where it changes and he sells that change from distress to being total buy-in into the moment. Yeah. And just for that one short moment in this film, and what is really set up to be the only moment in his life, he is truly happy. He is truly expressing himself. He is truly free and liberated.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's glorious, isn't it? It's really nice. And then offset that, the kind of free spirit party that we're at there, into the next sequence, which is the cocktail party.
Another party.
Which is the polar opposite, isn't it, in a way? This kind of like, obviously we start to find out that it's filled with kind of plants from the company, essentially, right? And we're back into, I don't know, kind of corporate paranoia thriller at this point as well, aren't we, really? Where we see Rock Hudson kind of completely lose it because he gets so drunk, and then just the kind of sinister reaction to him accidentally kind of revealing his previous identity, But
that seems, the amazing thing about it is that it comes in straight after, buttress straight up against that grape stop scene. Yeah. We're given absolutely no air, and it turns on a dime.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're not allowed, we're not allowed to, apart from that eruption that we get from the Hamilton Wilson. There's no time for him to. We don't even have a bridge of any sort.
No.
To take him from one scene to the other. It's just straight into it. So there are obviously, I can only assume there would be moments in between, but I think it's a really ballsy thing as filmmakers to decide to do that, to dismantle him, to build him up and then just dismantle him like that.
Yeah.
So quickly.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, don't enjoy yourself for too long. Don't forget which film you're in, right? And then we get really sinister again all of a sudden here.
Exactly.
This is, again, I loved this scene. I think it's brilliant. I love that woman who he chats to, who is like, talks about changing sects, you know? She's so good.
But when she has to explain, she goes, sex, S-E-C-T-S, not S-E.
Yeah, and she says something like, right now we're in Aztecs and we're dabbling in virgin sacrifice and all of this stuff. Again, like, there's something of it. There's something, again, it reminded me a bit of Rosemary's Baby or something.
Absolutely. No, that's so much like, you know, the party scenes of Rosemary's Baby. And you just get this feeling of that, the idea of that party going on and something else is going on underneath. And what is it? Like, everyone else is in on a different party to him. Everyone else is complicit with it, and he's still not there, right? And he can't help that inebriation, drinking, which Hudson actually got drunk for that scene to do it.
Oh, did he? Amazing. God, there's so much just like realism. Again, going back to that idea of verite and documentary sort of realism in this.
Absolutely. Well, we just, you know, you were talking about the Malibu house. That was Frankenheimer's actual home.
Wow. Okay.
And they shot in that home, and which alarmingly, I have a feeling possibly disappeared at the start of this year, because that's where the fires burnt along.
Oh,
So I think that was the strip. There was just a certain, like a kilometre or two of houses along that strip of Malibu Beach. It was kind of that precious little bit of real estate, and they all went. The fire jumped the road and burnt them all down. So that house probably went as well, because it was still standing up until recently, you know, with rigs on cars that were shooting into cars rather than having rear projection on the outside of the cars.
Right, yeah.
You've got that all the way through seconds.
Love that.
So despite the fact that you've got this really overtly arty camera work, and especially in terms of the lenses and the fisheyes and the really wide lenses, it's actually, you know, mainly locations.
I love that. I think that's what makes it look so good still to this day, actually. You know, it really holds up in that regard, doesn't it?
You do. You get plonked in that moment, like right from the start when we're in that Grand Central Station.
Yeah.
You feel the sense they are actual people walking around at the time, and they were hiding cameras in briefcases and things like that to get the shots.
Yeah.
Then they were creating decoys on, like, I think they got the B unit, the camera unit, to set up like a pin-up girl taking off her clothes and stripping down to bikinis in front of a guy. So everyone looked at that.
Oh, that's so cool.
They weren't. Yeah.
I love it. Oh my God. But yeah, it's great. Again, the way the tone shifts in this cocktail party scene, and that moment when suddenly all the men like pick him up and carry him into the other room, and then Nora walks in and she's furious, and you realize Nora's part of this too, and it really suddenly, you know, the horror comes back again, doesn't it, from this point onwards, you know?
And that's heartbreaking. You see his heartbreak at that point. You see where I think this film, it's really got, it's hopeless. It's got no hope.
Yes, absolutely.
We're not given, and that's possibly why it wasn't very well received, because, you know, a lot of people, even with their dark subject matter, like a little bit of sugar.
Yeah, completely.
But we're given nothing here. And I do believe that, you know, despite the fact that her being really an escort for the company, she does grow to like him, you know. Definitely. And she said she wasn't comfortable being angry and delivering it in that cold, angry, like, how dare you way.
Yeah.
But she said that Frankenheimer convinced her to do the 2 deliveries, her way and his way, and then ultimately use his way. And she said he was right. It works so much better to have done it that way. And that amazing line where she calls him out, "Who do you think you are?"
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate. He doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know. And so he decides he wants to try again, right? He calls the company and says, "I want to change. This isn't working. I want to change identities again," essentially.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah, which is then, of course, when we get the final sequence, I suppose, back at the company again, where things get, again, pretty nasty all of a sudden. I mean, again, it feels very abrupt, actually, the way this movie comes to a conclusion, doesn't it? You know?
Yeah. Actually, Mike, there's one scene that's in between that I think when he kind of sets off, breaks free from the leash, the company leash as such, but he chooses to go back to his family home
of course.
and confront his wife.
Yeah, of course, which is a really kind of quite sad scene, actually, isn't it? Yeah.
It is really interesting. And that differs from the book in that the book has it more like a chase scene, right? And I kind of feel that it's interesting how the action element was they've taken away the action element in this film adaptation and made it more of this little sad reflection, like just given him, he's just gone home. He just wants to go back and see if there's a piece of him and see what's happened when he's not there and he's believed to be dead, and is there grief? Is there anything? And it's so sad because there's nothing. There's just nothing. Yeah. She's given away his stuff.
Yeah.
She has a photograph of him that is just like the most stern headshot anyway, and that they use in the newspaper as well.
Right.
That is just like, it feels token. It's there because she's a widow, and that's what a widow would do at that time. You know, put up the photograph and, you know, be the grieving widow. But she talks about how she didn't know him.
I know.
And when he says that he was an admirer of his artwork, she's like, oh really? Yeah. Like, well, you know, and the insinuation being, well, he wasn't good at it. Mm-hmm. In fact, it kind of seems like he wasn't good at anything. It's just such a sad scene. It's really heartbreaking. You know, you've seen the chance of Nora being something authentic, and that ripped away from him. And then that homecoming, that really sad homecoming, really being signing, you know, that's the ringing of the death knell and the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. But I could imagine it if it was in Hitchcock's hands, for example. I could imagine that he would have gone along more of the lines that David Eli wrote in the book, and you would have had more of the, you know, Mr. Kaplan stuff from North by Northwest.
Yeah,
that kind
absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
And there are a couple of brief moments, aren't there, where he's traveling to go back to go see his wife, and you see there are men kind of following him and keeping an eye on him and that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're right. It kind of touches upon it, but yeah, you're absolutely right. If this was a Hitchcock thriller, they would be leaning into that so much more.
So much more. And there would have been, you'd feel that rolling pace more. And also it would have been less quiet if it was a Hitchcock film. But no, there's some really brave decisions I believe made in this film, and that was one of them. Just to choose to have him on the run but not on the run.
Yeah.
there's no sense of that. No sense of he's fleeing something, but there's no sense of urgency. It's just a terribly melancholic, nostalgic, sad scene.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to the company, as we know.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And again, we get some interesting stuff here. Finally has a little discussion with his old friend Charlie, right, as well, which is interesting. Yeah.
Charlie, played by Murray Hamilton, no relation to Arthur Hamilton, the actor Murray Hamilton, who, I think people would mainly recognise him from Jaws, actually. He played the mayor in Jaws.
Of course,
but he was, I thought that was another beautiful performance such a small moment in the film, but a really standout moment. It seems sincere, yet when you actually really look at it and think about it, he's just signed his friend's death warrant in recruiting him, and he knows that.
Yeah.
You know? And yet, and it's kind of like, well, I had to, you know, it's like this idea that no agency over your life, you know, and, you know, I'll go back to it, these wealthy, white, straight men in America who have no agency over their life or feel like they don't.
Right.
And he feels like he has no other recourse. Yet, that's Charlie. The Hamilton Wilson character doesn't call anyone. He says he can't think of anyone. And I don't know whether that's sort of a redeeming quality for him in it, or whether that's just shows how incredibly lonely he is, that he doesn't have anyone to call, or whether how incredibly naive he is and he doesn't really believe what's going to happen to him happens.
Yeah, I mean, there is also that terrifying kind of thing that all the way from the beginning, there are so many ways in which he could have got out of these various situations, but he always just goes along with whatever people ask him to do, right, from the very beginning as well.
Absolutely.
Which I always find quite scary. As quite an easygoing guy myself, I always think, God, that's what I would do as well, probably. I always think this when I watched, when I watched films like Speak No Evil. Did you see Speak No Evil a few years ago?
Yes,
Emma?
yes.
I just kept thinking, God, that would have been me. I wouldn't have just left. I would have been too polite, you know.
I know what I know what you mean, and that is actually a really good point, Mike. It's what is instilled in us is to be polite.
Yeah,
and polite to the point that we go to our own deaths.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's amazing how that can play out in a cellular level in how you brought up and passed down through generations, right? And this film is steeped in politeness. It's, you know, customer service.
Right.
You know, A+ for customer service, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah. They're not a company that like kidnaps him in the night and shoves him in the back of a van, although they do put him in the back of a van.
Yes.
They do all of these things to him, but they do it in a polite way, right? And it's really interesting.
And he's constantly on this journey that's this basically this road to nowhere, and it's kind of that Ouroboros cycle where it's the snake eating its own tail, like, you know, this idea from birth to death to the grave, like he kind of comes around full circle. But he's constantly traveling through it. If you think about it, he goes from the train to the car, then he's like at Lafayette, he's in the back of the van, he's here, he's on a plane going to Malibu, he's back again, he's on the gurney, you know, he's constantly being moved from one place to another. So it's got that, I think, more than travel in the liberating, free, wonderful sense. It's more of that conveyor belt feel of, the factory, and a factory of life, factory of process, factory of capitalism, and in informing this film, there's so much that informs this film, Mike. I tell you what, it's a deep vein to tap. But Frankenheimer himself was a very politically motivated man, I should say. Was Bobby Kennedy's campaign manager, literally filmed all his ads at the time of his presidential campaign. No doubt, you know, was on the left side of politics, hence this association with a lot of blacklisted actors. And, you know, you see this is a direct attack against capitalism and the establishments of capitalism, the corporate structures of capitalism, what is deemed as okay as part of the capitalist system. So I think that's another way of reading it, another very strong thematic reading. And that comes from its authors and also the climate of the time and what was going on at that point in time with Cold War politics. Cuban Missile Crisis was only a few years before this, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And again, that kind of the sort of the corporate politeness, even of his terrifying death scene at the end, where he's strapped down, and there's that whole sequence about, like, are you still Protestant, or I'm the guy that kind of is going to read him his last rites or whatever, like all of that kind of the admin of his death as he's being like wheeled down a corridor to his doom.
Don't you love that guy though, who says, I'm actually ordained as a rabbi, I'm this and that, I can do, it might sound strange, but I can do whatever you need,
Yeah.
And that shows, that was a big thing. Like, religion plays such a small part in this film.
Yeah.
And it's at a time when, it's America. Religion always plays a big part of everything in America.
Yeah.
Yet they chose not to do that in this film. In fact, they make it so trivial.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of make it a joke.
Yeah.
In the end, as he's going to his death.
Yeah. And again, that offset of tones of that kind of really dark comedy with... This is genuinely disturbing, this stuff, when Rock Hudson is screaming and he's bound and gagged, like it's, again, it dips into like real horror here and, body horror, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's, and when you've come from this, this grandfatherly visit from the Will Geer character, the old man, who is the kind of the head of the company, and comes in and seems so sympathetic, but when it comes down to it, is just, really quite okay with signing off on his death, and is just like, c'est la vie, what a shame.
What a shame. So disappointed it didn't work out for us all, but Yeah.
He actually says something that really plays out to me. Just watching the film again before coming to you today, and because I wanted to watch it again, so it was just fresh in my mind. And he says something along the way of not wanting practicalities or something get in the way of progress. And it really reminded me of the rhetoric that's coming out of these tech companies that are creating or coming up with artificial intelligence, especially in terms of stealing authors' works, right? And other people's IP, and saying, but, this is so important what we're doing. We don't want that to get in the road of innovation. And that's the argument that is actually being made to courts. We shouldn't get in the road of innovation. This is so important. And that seems to be what, back here in 1965, 66, when the film came out, what that character was saying. He feels like he's allowed to do it. He's been given license to do it. And he's comforting, but ultimately he's like, see you later, off you go to the gallows.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely terrifying, isn't it? Yeah, so bleak, so bleak. And what do you make of that very, very end as he dies and we get that sort of vision of him on the beach with his wife and daughter, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel that is the memory coming into play, the aspect of memory.
Right.
And that the saying that the memory in some ways, it dies with you, but it just becomes ethereal, doesn't it? It's just a sense of something. Yeah. It's just like, really, you can go super meta on this and, this idea of film being memory, the imprint of film. Yeah. We're talking about a film where Salome Jens, I hope I don't moz her, is still with us, but everyone's dead. So this is the memory of them. Right. This is what we've got here.
Yeah.
This can go deep. This, you keep on going, you keep on digging into seconds, and it just gives you more and more and more. And you find that even watching it this time, and I've written a book on it, and I still found more stuff when I was watching it again. It's just remarkable.
I love that. It's the gift that keeps on giving, Emma. I love it.
It is. And there's something else I think I should point out. Richard Anderson, who, old friend at the end with the cranial drill, right? Who is also the one who says to Wilson, once he's unbandaged, "You're my best work, what a masterpiece you are. Look at you," as when he emerges as Rock Hudson. That actor, he was the creator of the Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man in the TV series. You know, he was the creator in the series of those characters.
Yeah.
So he kind of has, so he's the creator. He's the Frankenstein, the Dr. Frankenstein in this. And he was the Dr. Frankensteins in those movies too. Or those
the
series.
mad inventor.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
fantastic.
So many interesting little tidbits about this movie, actually. It's so interesting.
There are, Frankenheimer's also, his films, they're just the making of and just just where they come from and what all the characters, just the remarkable talents at play. I think Frankenheimer himself, despite, like I said, he still had a filmmaker's ego, he, very much recognize the contribution of others, and they're very much collaborative pieces that I think are sums, bigger than the sum of their parts. They're proof of how, when you get the right people together for a certain project, and when you're able to communicate a certain vision, which he obviously was, that you can come up with gems, some really, magic.
Yeah. Completely. That's incredible. Well, there you go. Well, seconds, we're going to wrap up on this shortly. But first of all, let's head on over to our first Wild About Horror segment of the series, because Freudian cinephile Mary Wild has some thoughts she wants to discuss on John Frankenheimer's Seconds.
Hey Mike, Mary Wild here, with some thoughts on John Frankenheimer's film Seconds. Rock Hudson plays Arthur Hamilton, a middle-aged suburban banking executive who, despite his professional success, remains profoundly unfulfilled. He is offered the chance to start over through a shadowy agency that provides a new body, a new face, and a new life. Arthur is stuck in a dull commuter routine, a job on autopilot, a marriage drained of excitement. His interest in painting hints at a repressed libidinal drive, a path not taken. His daily reality is, for all intents and purposes, a foreclosure of desire. He is chosen by a mysterious organization who have been watching him, like the psychoanalyst who knows you before you know yourself. They offer him the trapdoor to stage his death and be reborn as someone else. The scenes where he's first drawn into the company are truly bizarre. Kafkaesque corridors, out-of-proportion spaces, uncanny interactions. These mirror the surreal qualities of dream work in psychoanalysis, where the unconscious is structured like a language, but expressed as disjointed fragments, distortions, and spooky substitutions. The company operates outside of normal reality, a pocket where the usual rules don't apply. This is the analytic space itself, a room outside of time where fantasy is staged and restaged. What's offered to him is technology as salvation. Science here is imbued with the sacred knowledge of vitality, invested with a near-religious aura that promises meaning through youth. It is positioned as the analyst, the subject supposed to know, the one presumed to hold the secret key to his desire, the guarantee that life can be restarted, redirected, and made whole. Arthur's transference is total. He hands over his body, identity, and autonomy, expecting to be reanimated and revived to the fullness of life. The procedure is a ritualized, fetishistic surgery. It is framed as both scientific and mystical. In Lacanian terms, it designates the objet petit, that elusive object of desire disguised as technology. Reborn as Tony Wilson, he's transplanted to California, set up as a successful painter, and integrated into a bohemian milieu. On the surface, it's the fantasy made flesh, youth, artistry, eroticism, the liveliness he thought he'd lost. Yet this life is staged, overdetermined, and already pre-scripted by the company. His subjectivity hasn't changed, only the signifiers around him have been artificially altered. His desire remains unaddressed. Psychoanalysis teaches us that no matter what anyone tries to sell you, it is not possible to outsource desire. One of the most striking sequences in Seconds is the grape-stomping bacchanal. On the surface, it's meant to mark Tony's liberation, his loosening of inhibitions, and entry into the bohemian vitality promised by the company. But the scene stages both a fantasy of regression and a crisis of enjoyment. Stomping barefoot in a vat of grapes evokes the primal pre-Oedipal return to bodily immediacy and infantile play. It's the Dionysian fantasy of being absorbed into collective pleasure, dissolving the alienated ego into ecstatic merger. Yet for Tony, the moment is awkward and uncanny. He hesitates and resists before finally joining in. Even as he surrenders, the scene never fully convinces. His so-called freedom is overcoded. It's orchestrated by the company, overseen by Nora, and thus functions less as genuine enjoyment than as a scripted performance of it. In Lacanian terms, it is a command to enjoy, a superego injunction masquerading as liberation. The very excess of vivacity here underscores the absence at the heart of Tony's desire. What should have been the eruption of the life force becomes another failure of transference, another reminder that erotic effervescence cannot be manufactured or imposed from without. Just as in analysis, when the fantasy that the analyst knows the way inevitably collapses, the technology invariably malfunctions too. The promise of restored vitality through the artificial restaging of youth is exposed as an illusion. Society and the company conflate life force with youth as though it were a property that can only be housed in smooth skin. Middle-aged or elderly spiritedness is rendered unthinkable, unimaginable, and foreclosed from representation. Aging is equated with decay, and the possibility of erotic aliveness in later life is erased. When technology cannot bridge this manufactured gap, when Tony remains alienated from his own desire despite his new body, disappointment is inevitable. Instead of renewal, he experiences only more estrangement from his art, his lovers, and crucially, his own body. This is the failure of transference. The analyst, the technology, the fantasy of the big other cannot provide wholeness. The real horror is not the grotesque surgery or the conspiracy of the company. It's the realization that there is no external solution to the void in desire. Science and technology can reshape flesh, but cannot reanimate a lost unconscious drive. Tony hasn't been reborn. He's just lodged in an experience alien to himself, a chess piece controlled by the company. In the end, what was promised as life-renewing technology is revealed as a death drive machine. Arthur Hamilton sought a second chance. He attempted to access seconds at life's buffet spread, but what he gets is physical and ontological annihilation. This film stages a paradox. We approach the psychoanalyst, or the scientific machine, as the subject supposed to know, hoping they'll guide us home in the wilderness of subjectivity, But we find that meaning lies not in the other, but in ourselves. The company offers a technological fantasy of a new lease on life. The unconscious reveals the futility of that fantasy. What Seconds leaves us with is a confrontation with the limits of advanced knowledge and the inevitability of desire's dissatisfaction. Until next time.
A big thank you to the brilliant Mary Wilde. And don't forget, if you want to hear more of Mary's takes, you can sign up to her Patreon, patreon.com/Mary Wilde. Well, Emma, there's probably so much more we could have said about this movie, but we're already at like an hour and 40 minutes into this discussion. So,
yeah, exactly. We haven't covered everything, but I think, this is what we've got to remember with film. We've got to, you don't want to cover everything. You want to let people go and find their own stuff in it as well. Yeah. And I think Seconds can deliver that for different people. Just go in with an open mind is what I would say. And go in. I would hope that people would listen to us, Mike, after they've seen the film, actually, because
absolutely.
It's a really nice one to go in on cold. It's one that delivers so well when you've gone in cold.
Agreed. Completely agree. Incredible. Well, there we go. Well, Emma, thank you so much. This has been such a brilliant discussion. Thank you so much for joining me.
So enjoyed it.
I'm so glad. Final question for you, Emma, which I have to always ask all of my new guests is, what is your favourite ever horror movie?
Oh, this is a question that's asked of me so often, and I never can answer it because I have so many. How could I pick out of the books that I've written? They're all my babies. So first of all, I'd have to put Seconds and The Fly and The Bride of Frankenstein up there because they are my books. But
yes.
But as well, I think that there's go-to movies, the ones that I go back to and constantly astonish me and have become kind of comfort films in a strange, weird way because I'm obviously a weirdo, is Rosemary's Baby, which we've already mentioned today, The Exorcist and Alien.
Oh.
They just have that effect on me every time I watch them. I'm just like, wow, blown away like it's the first time.
Incredible. Amazing choices. Oh, brilliant. Well, Emma, just remind people before you go, where can they find you online, on social media, and where can they find your work, your books, if they want to pick up what you've written?
Well, they can pretty much books in all good bookstores. I'd encourage anyone to go into their local bookstore and order it, keep it, we don't need to go to the big boys. Let's keep small bookstores and small suppliers going.
Yeah.
But emmawestwood.net is my kind of little presence online. That's where I try to keep all my film ramblings or pointing to them in one place. And on Blue Sky as well. Literally emmawestwood.bsky.social. So there you go.
Amazing. Emma, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's fantastic. Thank you.
And that's it for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. And one more time, a massive thank you to my brilliant brand new guest, Emma Westwood. What a joy to have her on the podcast. Hopefully she'll be back again next season. So let me know what you thought of this week's film, Seconds. I loved that movie. There was so much to dive into there. I would love to hear your thoughts. You can get in touch by emailing me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find me on all the socials, of course. Evolution of Horror is on Instagram and Facebook. I, Mike Muncer, am on Instagram and Blue Sky. You can also discuss this week's episode with fellow listeners by joining the Evolution of Horror Discord or the Evolution of Horror discussion group, which can be found on Facebook. If you want to treat yourself to regular bonus episodes and get ad-free versions of this season, then join our Patreon, patreon.com/evolution of horror. In the next couple of weeks, we've got a really exciting top 50 countdown. All patrons voted for their favourite horror films of the 21st century so far, and that is kicking off our results countdown in a 2-part special with Jamie Graham next week. That's going to be available on Patreon, patreon.com/evolution of Horror. This podcast is part of the Evolution of Horror Network. We've got 2 other weekly podcasts going on right now. Carry On Up the Podcast, in which Susan Calman and I are journeying our way through every single film in the Carry On franchise, and Hammer Time, in which Becky Dark and Kevin Lyons are watching and discussing every single Hammer horror film in chronological order. You can find any EOH Network podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So, on to next week then, and this is, I think, one of the most weird kind of series of episodes I've ever done, going from Carry On Screaming to Seconds to next week's film, because next week I'm going to be joined by Kevin Lyons and we are going to be discussing his favourite movie of all time, one of the most seminal sci-fi films ever made, 2001 A Space Odyssey. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.